The sound of the backholds woke me before sunrise. At first, I thought it was thunder rolling through the valley, that deep, rumbling growl that shakes the ground before the rain. But when I stepped outside, still in my flannel robe, I froze. It wasn't thunder, it was the HOA's hired crew while broken bar tearing down my dam. I stood there, speechless, as bulldozers chewed through the wall I'd spent 15 years building, a brick by brick, rock by rock. The same dam that kept the valley below safe from floods, the same dam that had saved half that neighborhood more than once, and all because they claimed I hadn't paid my HOA fees. I'm James Taylor, 72 years old, retired civil engineer, and a man who once believed that common sense still had a place in this world. When my wife and I bought his land 20 years ago, it was nothing but a patch of forgotten farmland near Clearwater Ridge. I designed a small earthen dam on the upper end of my property, something simple yet strong, to manage runoff and create a small lake. It wasn't just for us. It kept floodwaters from reaching the lower community, the very people who now call themselves the Clearwater Ridge home. They loved that dam when the storms came. They called it James's miracle. They even put me on the HOA board for a few years, back when things were still neighborly. But things change when greed takes root. When new management took over the HOA, everything turned sour. They started charging absurd environmental maintenance fees, view obstruction fines, and community improvement dues. I tried reasoning with them, explaining that my property was outside their jurisdiction. The dam sat entirely on my land. I maintained it, inspected it, and paid for every repair myself. But they didn't care. To them, my dam was an HOA asset, even though their charter didn't include my property. When I refused to pay their ridiculous canoe fees, they started sending threats, letters, fines, and eventually broken bar lawsuits. I still remember the day their lawyer, a smug young man with slicked back hair, told me, "If you can't comply, we'll take action ourselves." I laughed. "You touch that dam, and you'll be the ones needing lawyers." He smirked. "We'll see about that, Mr. Taylor." Months passed. I thought the whole thing had blown over. But one Friday morning, they struck. The HOA president, a woman named Brenda Cole, sharp suits, sharper tongue, showed up with a demolition crew and a local deputy. They claimed they had a court-approved order to remove unauthorized infrastructure. I asked to see it, but they refused. The deputy just said, "I'm here to keep the peace." Peace? They tore into my dam while I stood powerless. I shouted, pleaded, even called my lawyer, but by the time he arrived, half the wall was gone. Water started trickling through the breach, muddy and angry. I warned them it wasn't safe, that if they didn't stop, the whole valley could flood. Brenda just smirked. "You should have paid your dues, James." 2 days later, the sky turned black. The forecast warned of heavy rain, the kind that made the local news crawl in red alerts. I spent that night pacing my porch, watching the clouds roll in over the ridge. My heart sank with every flash of lightning. By midnight, the rain came down in sheets, relentless and cold. The lake swelled. The water pressed against what was left of the dam, pounding it like fists against a door. I called the sheriff, the HOA, even the city's emergency line, and no one answered. At 3:27 a.m., I heard it, the sound of the earth cracking open. The dam burst. A wall of water roared down the valley, swallowing everything in its path, fences, mailboxes, cars, and finally, the pristine homes of Clearwater Ridge. I watched in horror from the hilltop as streetlights flickered and vanished underwater. Within 15 minutes, the entire lower neighborhood was under 4 feet of muddy, debris-filled water. When the sun rose, the valley looked like a war zone. Emergency crews swarmed in. Neighbors screamed, crying over lost homes and ruined memories. I walked down with my old raincoat and flashlight, trying to help where I could. No one would look me in the eye, not even Brenda. When the news crews arrived, they asked me what happened. I told them the truth. I showed them the paperwork proving the dam was privately owned and properly maintained until the HOA's interference. The footage spread like wildfire. Local news ran the headline, "HOA demolishes dam, causes massive flooding." Brenda tried to shift the blame, saying I had failed to maintain the structure, but the city engineers confirmed my design had been safe until someone deliberately weakened it. The whole board resigned within a week. Lawsuits flooded in faster than the water had, and while no amount of justice could undo the damage, seeing accountability finally reach them was something. Months later, I stood where the dam once was, now just a broken gaps between two hills. Nature had begun to reclaim it. Grass sprouted along the edges, and birds nested near the quiet pools that remained. A few of the old neighbors, the ones who still had compassion left, came to help me rebuild. Not a dam this time, but the small community pond with proper drainage and runoff channels. Together, we planted willows and laid stones, turning tragedy into something that gave back. One of them, an older man named Harold, patted my shoulder and said, "You tried to save them, James. They didn't listen, but you still showed up when they needed help. That's the kind of man you are." I didn't say much, just smiled, watching the sunset reflect off the water. It's funny, in a sad way, the whole thought they could destroy something good to make a point about power. But power doesn't last, principles do. That valley will dry, homes will be rebuilt, but people won't forget what happens when arrogance meets nature, or when greed tramples over wisdom. As for me, I still live up on the ridge, still wake up every morning with coffee and watch the mist roll over what used to be clear water. It's quiet now, peaceful, even, and every time it rains, I remember the night everything fell apart, a broken bar, and how sometimes nature has a way of teaching us lessons no courtroom ever could.